To Russia-Ukraine conflict now. Talks held between US, European and Ukrainian officials over the last 3 days in Florida aimed at ending the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. American Special Envoy Steve Witkoff called the meetings and separate talks with Russian negotiators productive and focused on a shared strategic approach between Ukraine, the United States and Europe. The meetings in Miami were the latest in a series of talks between the US, Russia and Ukraine on a US-drafted 20-point plan to end the conflict. Witkoff said a US-Ukraine meeting focused on 4 key points: further development of the 20-point plan, a multilateral security guarantee framework, a US security guarantee framework for Ukraine, further development on economics and prosperity to rebuild Ukraine. As Russia's conflict in Ukraine is going towards the end of its 4th year, and as the US and others are trying to negotiate a ceasefire, the cost of the ongoing conflict has been a major concern to Ukraine and its European partners. Now, the EU has agreed on an aid package for the war-torn country. Lars Holter is with DW and joins me from Berlin. Lars, what exactly is Brussels doing about the matter?
Thanks for having me. Well, let's start with the good news. The European Union has decided to grant Ukraine an interest-free credit in the amount of 90 billion euros. And that financial help doesn't come a day too soon. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky had warned his allies across Europe that his country was running out of funds and would have to end the production of drones it so urgently needs to defend itself against Russia. Now, 90 billion euros will flow for 2 years, interest-free, like I said, and all of it is financed by the EU taking on debt, which again is guaranteed by the EU budget. Now, for the not-so-good news, this construct sending money in form of a credit is what some of the member nations had called a Plan B. The initial idea that Germany and some others had preferred was to use frozen Russian assets to support Ukraine. Some 210 billion euros are frozen in European accounts, most of it in Belgium. And many had thought it fair to use this money taken from the aggressor to help out Ukraine. After all, they're expecting Russia to eventually pay reparations to Ukraine anyway. So there is some legal and ethical argument behind this, even though, of course, the whole idea was risky and an end of the ongoing conflict is currently not in sight.
But why did EU members not go for Plan A now? Why didn't they use the Russian assets to support Ukraine?
Simple answer: because Belgium blocked the effort. Most of the frozen Russian assets are actually in Belgium. They're with Euroclear. That is definitely not a household name, and it's not even a name most people in business and finance would recognize. Euroclear is a leading global provider of financial market infrastructure services for domestic and cross-border securities transactions. That's where the Russian assets are. And the Belgian government was afraid that if they were handed over to Ukraine, that Russia might sue them and that the responsibility for the entire transaction would fall on Belgium. So they had asked for unlimited guarantees from EU partners to help them out. That was tricky, and in the end it was actually Hungary, usually the EU member country closest aligned with Moscow, that brought up the idea of a credit, and that was voted on, confirmed, and is now in place.
And what are the reactions you are picking up on this deal?
There was a lot of disappointment internationally, with many saying that not using Russian funds out of fear that Moscow would retaliate would be read as a sign of weakness. Then again, and most importantly, at least Ukraine is getting the funds they so urgently need. Now, as for the countries that originally wanted to use Russian assets, they too called the outcome of the EU Commission meeting a success. But that was to save face. Just looking at Germany, Chancellor Friedrich Merz celebrated the fact that Ukraine would get the financial aid it needed. But since he had made it very clear from the get-go that, in his opinion, Russian funds should be used, this outcome is a clear loss for him.